Joe, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us today. I thought we could just begin with the very beginning and ask you what your full name is and your birth date.
Okay. Joseph Walter Thompson, January the 10th, 1933.
And where were you born?
I was born in the city of Baltimore, Maryland.
And could you tell us a little bit about your family of origin?
I wish I could. My father, and I think it was mostly in Maryland, but my mother family was from Norfolk, Virginia. And I never met my great-grandparents, but I used to go to Virginia with my mother. She would go during the summer, and she would stay with her sisters, my aunts. This is my sister and myself would be going. And my grandfather, he actually ran a restaurant, and I would go there and eat the food that he had his cooks make, and so that was fun. And I just loved going to Norfolk. And my father was Maryland mostly, and I never met my grandparents on my father's side, and but I had lots of aunts and uncles, and I had one of my uncles he lived in New York, and I had aunts that still lived in Maryland, Baltimore. And so just growing up as a kid with your aunts and uncles, And during the summer sometimes I would go and stay with my uncle in New York. And sometimes I would go and stay with my aunt, which is aunt on my mother's side, also in New York. I forgot the name of the area, but she was also a nurse. And what was interesting is that she had the same birthday as me, and I could never understand why she looked older than I did. But she was also born on January the 10th.
And you mentioned that your mother was a nurse, and that when we were speaking before the camera was going, that your mother and all of her sisters were in nursing. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And to say, I don't know whether my mother got some kind of a problem, while being a nurse that caused her to pass away so young. But it was fun. It was, in fact, I have an aunt. Well, she just passed away, but she used to come and stay with us when we were in. During the last few years, and I would ask her, why did my dad send me and my sister live with my aunt and uncle away from us? And he was telling me that, she said, I don't know, but your mother was a very neat lady, and she'd make sure everything was clean. And your aunt that you were going to, she was also very clean and liked to make sure everything was clean and so forth. But at any rate, my aunt, the one that I was talking about, she lived to be long. She just died a couple of months ago at 102. Wow. So she was quite a lady. Yeah.
And what did your father do for work, or what were his major activities like?
Well, actually, he worked on the shipyard. I don't know exactly what he did for loading and stuff, but he also worked on a side job at I know it's a place where they had meetings and things, and I can't think of the name of it. But ones where they had celebrities come by and they would serve them. And in fact, my father often bring things home for us to eat or to drink, and so that was kind of neat.
Was your father a part of a union, or was that part of his life, working at the shipyard in Baltimore?
I think that was a union, right? And
okay.
the other area where he worked as a side job, I don't know how that was for him, but it was for celebrities. They would take care of celebrity that would come to visit there, and I don't know the name of I forgot the name of the place that he was at.
And what were the major activities of your parents and in your household? Was religion a big part of your household, or politics, or music?
It's hard to say. It wasn't so much politics. It's probably music, and I think the Bible was read a lot, but I don't remember really going to church that much. This is my early years.
Yeah.
I know when my mother died and I was sent to live with my aunt and uncle in Boston, I attended church quite a bit. In fact, I was confirmed as a Roman Catholic while in Boston. And interesting enough, when I was born, I was Christian, baptized as a Roman Catholic, even though we were Episcopals. And I thought that was interesting. But I don't remember so much about what is happening. My sister and I, we spent a lot of time, playing outside and with other kids and things. And I don't really remember a lot of the activities. But one thing is interesting, when we went to live with my aunt and uncle in Boston, and I was really almost petrified. I didn't understand why I had to go live with my aunt and uncle. My mother just passed away. So I never did get that answer exactly why we were sent there. But in any case, my sister was very, very bright. She graduated. Actually, she skipped a year in high school, and she graduated graduate number one from her college. When she went to college, she was graduate number one. Wow. She was very bright, and she ended up also not so much a nurse. She was sort of like I guess a caregiver or maybe a nurse, because kids would bring to her, she took care of them, make sure they're okay. And one of the experiences she had was that one of the kids there, he seemed to be always hungry and not taken care of. And so one day she decided to go visit his family and see how come he's not getting food or bringing lunch to school, or not to school, to where, I guess she was in school. And the family didn't care. They just didn't. And she said, at that point, I just decided to give up being a nurse. Wow. Or whatever it was she was
caregiving
doing.
Job.
Yeah. But I said, she died young. My sister she died when she was 50, because she had she had Raynaud's disease and sickle cell problem and lupus, so she didn't last very long. But she was very, very bright. Yeah.
Were you and your sister big readers when you were young?
She was. Not so much. I became more of a reader once I went to Boston and going to the school. It turns out I still do, I had a heart condition that required me Well, actually, they required me. I could not engage in sports or the gym classes. And during that time, I did a lot of reading. I loved to read. In fact, I've gotten several books from my teachers signed, me as a wonderful reader. Yeah. So that was good.
It was at age 10 that your mother passed away, and
Yeah,
then
I was
you went
age
to
10, yeah.
And so that
My
was
sister was 11, yeah.
So that was 1943 then.
Right.
And had you gone to the public kind of neighborhood school in Baltimore up to that time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what your community was like in Baltimore? Were you living right in the city, or?
Well, it was. I remember we moved several times, and the last time I remember the name of the street. It was Edding Street, which is in Baltimore, and it interfaced with North Avenue, and it was pretty much. I guess AfricanAmerican, if you say it that way, or black, whatever, oriented. There was no mixture. It wasn't that. It was a problem. It was just that we didn't mix with other groups. Although I did, because when I moved to Boston, of course, it was quite different. Neighborhoods were mixed more, but they weren't mixed that much where I was in Baltimore.
We were talking about when you moved to Boston, that it was much more kind of a mixed neighborhood.
More mixed, right. And went to school. Of course, I was, I guess, a sort of a nerd in a way, because I love books. I love to study, and I was also defender of one of my neighborhood kids. The kids would pick on him, and I would defend him because he was my friend. And so they left him alone. And I wasn't that big. I mean, I'm not a big person, but it was good because I was just into books. I love books, and so I did a lot of reading when I was not able to go to the gym or to do sports.
Right. Was there an area in your reading that particularly grabbed you? Fiction or nonfiction, or what?
Yeah, it was. Oh gosh, I remember, went away. It'll come back to me. But yeah, it was one author I like. I got most of his books. It was.
Were you reading any science fiction in those years?
Yeah, some, not that much.
Mm-hmm.
No, not that much. Just mostly books. But I just love to read. So.
And what area of Boston? In what area of Boston were you living?
Roxbury was a sort of a suburb. Yeah, that's where we lived, in Roxbury. And my uncle was called a master barber, and so once I got adjusted to being there, I ended up being a shop boy. Where actually I would walk. It wasn't that far from the shop. I would walk to the shop, and what I would do, I would sweep up the floor with hair and stuff all over the floor. I would brush off the customers. I got tips, and I would put in my favorite station, which was some of these the old stories, adventurous stories. I can't think of the name of the...
Right, sort of radio plays.
Yeah. Right. And I ended up getting also, later, got a shoeshine stand where I would shine shoes.
At your
uncle's shop? My uncle's shop.
Interesting.
And I remember one day this fella came into the shop to get his shoes shined, and I shined his shoes fine. And when I left, I said, "Do you know who that was?" "No, that was Count Basie." It turns out that across the street from the barber shop was a large facility called Hi-Hat, where they had entertainment. It's a restaurant and I guess entertainment facility. and that's where he was performing. And then we came over to get his shoes shined. But I spent a lot of time, obviously, at my uncle's barber shop, and then once I graduated from high school, then of course I got interviewed for MIT, and that.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your high school experience, where you were going to high school and how your interests were developing.
Well, the Boston Technical High School, was the name of the school. It's just a matter of liking the teachers, and that was important that I was good with the teachers, and sometimes I was sometimes high above my class, and so like sometimes we would have special groups, and because of my knowledge, I actually went off to the closet area separately, where the teacher came over and talked to me separately because I got more information to give her than the kids who were in the class. I got all A's in school.
Was there an area that you were really excelling in? Was mathematics special for you, or was it language?
It was everything. I can't think of any particular. I actually, when I was in school, I learned back there. I learned German. I liked German at the time, and what was the other language? It's mostly German. And then when I came out here later, went to school like here, it was mostly Spanish. But I just enjoyed school, I guess.
Did you have any particular mentors or teachers that you were especially close with?
Well, I always think of the one teacher, Mrs. Green, because I had several classes, and one was ancient history, and that's the one she actually gave me, and they gave me a book she signed because of my interest in ancient history, and but there's other teachers I can't think of their names.
Was the Boston Technical High School a place where people were coming from sort of like across the Boston area and commuting into the school, or was it for a particular, or was it for Roxbury, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
How was the Second World War kind of a presence in your life in those days? Was it really affecting the community, or
well,
what was it like?
Interesting, because I was like a shop boy in my uncle's shop, which was during that time period. There were a lot of military people coming in to get haircuts, and I would shine their shoes and talk to them, and they would give me tips and all that. But I never got involved in any military stuff, except when because of that time, you had to, if you were a certain age, you had to go in and be tested to be inducted into the service. Well, I'm 4F, so because of my heart and other problems, so I never went into the service. My uncle, the one who had the shop, he was a merchant marine. Okay. Yeah, and my dad never went into the service. I'm not quite sure what the problem was. But I didn't get too much involved in military stuff, except for those coming into the shop, uncle's shop. Yeah.
Was I know some barber shops can be almost like a social club as much as a place to get one's haircut. Was your uncle's shop kind of like that?
No, it was
social
more come in there, get your hair cut, do your talking while you're in the chair, and goodbye.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What were your... I know you couldn't participate in the sports. Were there any other school activities that caught your attention?
I know there was a special class we took, and I can't remember the name of it. When I wasn't in gym or sports, obviously I had to do something. I know I did a lot of reading.
Right.
But I think there was a class I had gone to, and I don't remember what it was. But I don't think really anything special. As I told you before, my memory is not that good.
It seems very good to me. Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about, as high school was as high school was getting toward its close, what were you thinking about? What were you thinking about doing? Did you have any particular career aspirations that really you held to, or?
What's really weird, I think, is that in your high school book, you write down what you want to be. And my ambition was to be a barber.
Okay.
And obviously that's not the case.
Yeah.
But, and so and then right away, that's when MIT came and interviewed, so that there was no really much of a time period between graduating from high school and going to work.
Well, we were saying that you were, no sooner had you written down in your yearbook that you're interested in becoming a barber that you got connected with MIT.
Right.
Could you tell us about how did that connection come about?
Well, I think they were looking for, I don't know how they derived a decision to do that, but they at MIT were looking for bright young kids who were not going to college. And so they interviewed kids from all the surrounding high schools. And then I got picked as the first one to do that. And so that's how I got involved. And I've never had to look for work since. So,
do you remember how that interview went, or what it was like? Do you have a memory of that?
No, I don't know what they asked me.
Yeah.
But whatever it was, I guess it worked out fine.
And was it the case that they were offering you? So the idea was that you could come and you could both work and study at MIT. Was that the
No,
the
it's just to come and work.
To come and work.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then after that, I ended up going to the MIT night school.
Right.
But that was not part of the.
I see.
The transfer, right?
And was it the case that they interviewed you and then they offered you specifically this job with the Whirlwind computer, or did they offer you different choices of what you might do there?
No, it's a job operating a computer in
Okay.
the MIT Computational Lab. The lab was down the street from MIT. It was a separate building.
Right.
And so that was the deal to work there as a separate it's a separate thing from MIT itself. It was a computation lab where they did a lot of work for different groups, different companies. Yeah.
And had you had any exposure to computers before this time? Did you know about computing and computers?
No, it's all brand new. And so, no, it's just a learning process, yeah.
And so was it, so this was at the computing laboratory, this is 1951 now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's in is it called the Barber building?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The Barber building, that's right.
And which had been a factory beforehand or something, and then they...
I don't know what it was before that. You
So were commuting in from Roxbury then? Or,
right.
Okay.
Right. I actually taking a bus.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I didn't drive, so I was using the bus to get to work.
And what was the training process like for you coming in? Had there been other operators for the Whirlwind computer before you?
Well, they had people who were getting their degrees. They were either in the master's or doctorate degree, and they would actually do some of the work themselves. So they had no what you call an operators. It was just the students, grad students who are coming in running for this stuff.
Right.
And so I was the first to, as see if it would work, and I guess it worked well. So I think then they hired more.
So you were the
kids.
very first person trained to be the operator.
Trained.
Now, what was that? Who was training you, and what was that? What was that like?
Well, that was Jack Gilmore, and I don't really remember. I know he would look a lot at the screens, and I would sit down and look there, and I just got used to the lights and the sound, and using learning how to read in the paper tape, and then learning how to understand what was on the paper tape, to reading it, and then because where the holes are punched, you got what is this? You had to learn the whole system. That you had to learn the computer cards, IBM cards.
Right.
So it was a learning process, and so I did a lot of talking to the people who worked there, doing things, and so I mainly absorbed all that as I was doing my work as an operator. So
was there a period of time where you were learning and then they kind of said, okay, you're operating the machine on your own now? Or
well, it had to be, because I ended up doing that.
Yeah.
And I guess it worked out fine.
Well, I would be curious to hear about what you just mentioned about the blinking of the indicator lights and the sounds of the machine. Were all those things, the patterns of the blinkings and the different sounds that the computer itself would make, could you tell if the computer was operating properly or
Right.
having a problem?
Right. Yeah, you got used to, if you're going to load in these programs and you know who it's for, and you get to the point where you understand what they're doing, and you understand the sound, because the sounds are different for the different operations. And when you're operating, whether it's putting in tapes or cards, whatever, or use magnetic tapes, you get to know the names of what's going on and the sound. And if something doesn't sound right, you realize something's wrong with the computer or something else. And you can actually stop things. And you can actually even look at your tapes and see if there's a problem with the tape or the cards or something. So it's a learning process you went through, but it's something that I guess I enjoyed. I just enjoyed doing the work. It's just, I know, it's hard to explain, I guess, because in a way, I guess I must have done a good job, because that's why RAND wanted to hire me to train their operators and then to learn programming.
Did you get into, I mean, clearly you had to understand, how these paper tapes were formatted and what the different perforations would mean. Were you also learning, were you also then, you were kind of having to learn a bit about the programming then?
Right.
But did you, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, did you have any, did you study programming as part of being an operator, or were they considered separate?
I would talk to the people that were there and get to know them, and they could explain things and answer my questions and what have you. But because it was so new, it was a learning process. You end up just learning as you went along. And sometimes you end up putting holes in a tape just to see what would happen. And you try it yourself. So you experiment it with some of the your thinking and see how it worked out. So it's and I don't remember at all how I ended up writing programs. I don't remember how I did that, but at any rate, it's a learning process, and I guess because I just enjoyed doing it,
Right.
It was great,
And and could you talk a little bit more about, what was actually making the sounds in the computer? It's an electronic computer, so in one sense you think, oh, well, what would the sounds be? Would it be the different tape drives going, or
they got all these vacuum tubes and transistors and stuff, and I don't know what all was causing the noise.
Right.
I just know that once you get used to a particular program that's being processed, because it wasn't at one time. The program would come in many times as whoever it was testing stuff, and so if something didn't sound right, you may even stop it and look at maybe did the tapes get in properly, did the cards get in properly, are there some problems with the tape, and so it's just something you just get used to the sound. And if it didn't sound right, either something's wrong with the input, or maybe they have to change a vacuum tube, or replace this, replace that. And so you have to have technicians come in and check things and see if that's the problem with getting a different sound.
Right.
So it's just one of those learning things, I guess.
And were you what were your working hours like? Did you work? I know they were. I imagine they were trying to, maximize the time on the computer, that people could run jobs on the computer. Were you working in the day or in the night or different
I ended up
times?
being alone working in the morning hours.
Okay.
And so I would go in and end up going to school. Then I'd leave school, go to work, and be there. And then I guess around 6, 7 o'clock or whatever it is, I'm finished. And I get the bus and go home, kind of thing.
So you were finished by 7 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, because I worked the morning hours.
Okay, so you went to the evening school at
Went
MIT.
evening school, right.
Well, then
And
went to work.
Went to work.
Okay.
Right. And then worked and then left there. So it was a pretty busy time.
I can imagine.
And
Could you describe your memories of just kind of what it was like physically working with operating the Whirlwind computer in the Barber building? What it was like in the building. Did the computer make things hot? Was it cold? Was it a loud environment? Any memories you might have of what it was. Was it dark?
I can't think of anything negative about working in the morning hours. I was used to, different sleep pattern, and I was used to working those hours and going to school first and going to work. And because I enjoyed what I was doing, it was not a negative thing for me. It was a very positive process for me. I just enjoyed doing it. And in fact, I wasn't sure I would enjoy working in the daytime with a lot of people running in and out. Basically, I was there and I had control by myself. And there weren't that many people around. So you had to get things done and make sure everything's okay. And
right. So. Were there particular people Were there particular people in the program that you interacted with more than others? Were there any people stand out as particularly important for your experience?
I can't think. It was more for people who were actually physically at the facility, because I could sit and ask them questions about what's going on, and they would explain things to me, and that they're doing, and it sort of made my work more interesting, and because they were there, the crazy hours also,
Right.
and so it's just good being able to interact. And then of course in the morning before I leave, I would interact with those who were coming in, and would just sit and talk, and then so it was just good communication.
Could you characterize what it was like to run a job on Whirlwind, to run a program? What was, to the extent that you can recall, what was actually involved? Were you going to a cabinet to pick up paper tapes, and to the extent that you can remember what it was like to run a job?
I'm not sure. I normally, if I can think, I always had everything I needed for that particular task. And I had the paperwork and everything. So I had all the cards there, or would have the paper tape there. And you have to make sure that when you feed the cards in, you're going in the right way.
Yeah.
But everything was there that I needed. I didn't have to stop to go get anything.
Okay.
Everything I needed to do to run that job, I had with me. I had it on the card I brought out or whatever. But it was there with me. I could not stop in the middle of a job to get more paper tapes or more cards. And then doing a magnetic tape, I'm not sure quite how I did that, how it got recorded on tape, and I had to run that way. Mm-hmm. But in any case, I didn't stop. I had to keep going until the job was finished.
And were the results typically output to additional paper tapes, or were there paper?
They were printed out.
Paper printed out.
Most of it, printed out. Sometimes you may have to generate other tapes and stuff, but basically the results that you wanted would get printed, and then so the person who came in, to get the job, they get their cards or tapes back and the printout of the results, and then they can go check and find where something went wrong. And sometimes when you're reading the cards, something doesn't work, and so you have to make a notation of that and indicate on the printout what happened and why you had to stop loading, because there's an error and you couldn't continue running, and that happens quite often. So yeah.
And there were other people working in the laboratory who were responsible for obviously getting you everything, all the cards and tapes you needed for the job.
By myself.
Oh, you did?
You would by myself, yeah.
Assemble all those things.
This was a solo job.
Okay, I get it.
No.
So you were doing that you were an operator for Whirlwind from 1951 to 1955. Is that correct?
That's about right, yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 4.5 years I was there.
Was it fairly, were things fairly consistent over that time, or was there a lot of change?
I can't remember, other than technology being changing, going from paper tapes to cards to tape to magnetic tape, or hand inputs, because sometimes we could put stuff in via our hands in the different push buttons.
Okay.
There were things you can actually key in and get things going. So you had to learn that too.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the most common thing that went wrong when you were operating the computer? Was it people having made errors in their programs, or was it hardware problems with tubes? What were some of the common
I don't remember.
difficulties?
It seemed to be more of the person making the problems. I don't remember much about the machines going down, occasionally, I said you get the problem with the vacuum tubes and transistors and stuff stop working,
Right.
but basically it was problems more with the person trying to run their job, and then something happens there, and you have to make a notation what happened and give it back to them. They'll fix it and then bring it back.
Okay.
But this is going back a lot of years.
It is, yes. Just looking at my question list here. Could you talk about the other operators? You were the first, but it went well, so they trained other people to be operators of Whirlwind.
Right.
Do you remember, just in general terms, like what the other operators were like? Were they young people like yourself, or?
Well, I think they hired more high school kids, but I don't remember much about the other operators, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I don't know how they performed. I don't know how long they stayed. It's
because
difficult.
you didn't overlap very much.
No, I mean, you would meet, obviously, but because you had to exchange, as one to the other. But I don't remember much about the other operators. To me, it's more my talking to the workers there, the adult who are in charge of certain areas. I would sit and talk to them more to kind of get a more feedback as to what they're doing and what I could learn from what they're doing, as opposed to talking to an operator. So I don't remember much about the operators.
At the Computer History Museum, we have a collection of today. We have a collection of over 700 paper tapes that are from Whirlwind, and
wow.
some of them date to the era when you were operating it. The earliest ones we have are from 1954, and
my goodness,
all of them seem to have some sort of long, inscrutable kind of number on it. Do you recall if there was sort of like a library of paper tapes, or was there seemed to be some sort of numbering system for these different programs, and I wondered if they were just a numbering system for the different jobs that people would make, or...
There might be, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I just don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious, because we're searching through documents, but to try and figure out what some of these index numbers mean on the paper tapes.
Yeah.
But so far we haven't figured it out. One thing that we have been learning from going through some of the documents is about this comprehensive system of utilities that which was...
Of what?
I think it was called the comprehensive system, or the comprehensive system of utilities.
Utilities.
That I think were on the magnetic tape drives.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, which seemed to be, a library of routines.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case.
For
Yeah.
different yeah. I was just wondering if you had any memories about that, if that was something that you needed to almost like change the system utilities for different jobs, or if it was, using a common system.
I remember tapes and things with IDs and all, but I don't remember exactly what I did with them.
Okay.
I just don't remember.
Sure.
Remember that.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Let's see, and some people who were on the research side, I guess you would call of the Whirlwind project, who we've had the chance to talk to, have done a little bit of describing the kind of community of researchers associated with the computer and social activities. And I was wondering if you and the other operators were part of that community of researchers who couldn't have been that much older than you.
I don't remember being involved in that sort of activity.
Okay.
I might have been, but I don't remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you started as an operator, were you kind of the youngest person in the BARDA building?
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were there any other African-American people working in the laboratory?
I was the first.
You were the first.
As far as I know, I don't know. Only time I saw an African-American come in when they had tours, groups coming in from maybe different colleges and stuff.
Yeah.
And as far as working there, I don't remember anyone at any time before, during the time I was working until later. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember how much later that was, but I was the first. As far as I know, I was the first.
Do you remember what the African American staff member who came after you was doing?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm hazy about the timing of it, but I know that at some point in here the Whirlwind activity, is kind of going also to Lincoln Labs, and that Lincoln Labs program is really getting going. Were you going to Project Lincoln or Lincoln Labs at all during your time at MIT?
Lincoln Lab is very familiar, but I kind of associated them together. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's many of the same people, but it's their designation just kind of changed.
Yeah, I can't really put it together. I just seem like they're all kind of interrelated in a way, and I don't know how to separate them out.
Well, I think it was when they were. Yeah, I think it was very interconnected. So but I just wondered if you went out to Lincoln at all. Well, maybe we could talk about how the job offer or the recruitment to join RAND in Santa Monica came about. Could you tell us a little bit about how those discussions began and what the job was that they offered you?
Not really. They came because they were doing work, and so I would obviously was programming, not programming. I was running their jobs, getting them results, and I guess over time they just felt that I could be of help to them if I was working for them, and that's when they made me the offer. And I don't know how the offer was made. Obviously, it had to be good because I left and went to work for them. And salary wasn't what you call that great at the time, but it was just an interesting, I guess, experience. And obviously, because I obviously had worked with them in terms of running their jobs, I was familiar somewhat with the personnel.
And the decision, by the time that you came out to RAND, the decision had been made to develop Whirlwind into the SAGE system, and that RAND was going to really take a leadership role in that effort.
Right.
Had you been to California before you arrived for work?
Never until when I joined RAND, the condition was that within 2 years I would be transferred to California. And so that was the condition of the hiring, is to do what I had to do, and then within a couple of years, I would be transferred to California with my family, if I had a family at that time, and fine.
Did you go right away, however? I mean, did you transfer to California? When did you come to California?
Within 2 years after
Okay.
I joined RAN.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe you could describe, just what Rand was like when you got to Santa Monica, and what the environment was like in which you were working. And
That's tough because obviously I liked it because I stayed and I was familiar with whatever I was doing okay. And they decided that obviously I was doing okay. They would not have sent me back or sent me to California to start work there. But I don't remember all the things I was doing.
Right.
You know.
Well, how did things when you got to California and you got to Rand? Was it then that you started to move more into programming as opposed to operating?
Oh no, I was programming at RAN, and then when I was transferred to California, I did not do operating. I was strictly programmer.
Okay. And could you talk about what it was like? So you were programming you were working on the SAGE programming effort.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Could you talk about just what that was like? Were you using pencil and paper or coding sheets, or were you punching cards, or what was programming like? Were you sitting at a desk writing things down?
Well, a lot of it was sitting, knowing what you had to do, and then I would sit and we would discuss it, and what I would do is do like a flow diagram that I would develop to show the sequence of things and how they interacted. And then I had to write a program that would perform as the flow diagram said, in order to then get converted back onto cards or tape or something and see how it worked. So it was a discussion up front, flow diagram the entire process, understand the entire process, and then annotate what you had to annotate to show how you're changing things, and then program.
And was this programming in the kind of like the assembly language of the SAGE computer, or?
Whatever language we had, a special program that would convert all this called, I can't think of the name now, but there was a program that would convert all the stuff you had, and you get it either on tape or whatever, and you read it in, and then oh boy, now my memory is bad.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
But it was a long turnaround to iterate on your program. It sounds like, if you had to go through.
You had to go through, and you had
steps.
and then you had to write it all down, and then had to get it typed and or whatever, and then develop to be picked up and do the job. I wish I could remember all that now. I can remember it.
When you made the move to California, which I guess must have been by 1957 or so. Then, were you? Had you gotten married by that point?
Yeah, we were married in '54.
In '54, okay. Yeah. While you were working in the Barber building.
Yeah, and we had 3 young kids.
Wow! By the time you moved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were renting in a house in Santa Monica, close to work. And do you remember?
Actually, we started renting before that in L.A., and then we eventually ended up getting a renting a house in Santa Monica.
And
Like I still remember the number. It was 1511A 16th Street
in
in Santa Monica. Yeah.
And it's quite a change from Boston.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Were you in the programming, the SAGE programming effort at Rand? How many people were in your organization? How many people were working on programming, would you say, in this time?
Had to be hundreds.
Hundreds.
Because, there's so many different areas. I started out and working, then I became what's called a unit head. I probably had 5 or 6 people working for me. And then I became a section head. It had more people. And I became a group head with more people. And I became a branch head with more people. I had probably 20, 30 people working for me. But it was a long process.
Yeah.
You have to go through.
And what was the composition of that programming group, like those hundreds of people? Was it mostly men? Were there some women? What about the racial diversity of the group?
Well, there weren't that many African Americans or Hispanics or whatever, but my experience with RAN SDC was very positive. And what I really liked about the company, they made no distinction between male and female. If you were doing the job properly, you got approved and promoted to run an activity and make sure that you were running it for the company, not for yourself, and that you were not colorblind. And what's very interesting, it's a side story,
Yeah.
but when I think of it, at that time I was a group head, and there's a young man from Texas, and he was using, to me, derogatory terms for black people, Afro-Americans. Okay, so one day he was in his office. We had a lot of single offices. One day he was in the office. I went in, closed the door, and talked to him about getting his act together. And we became the best of friends. And when I called him, it was high techs or something. And to me, it was a case of what you learn as a child. And if no one interrupts and gets you involved in something else, you will continue to do that which you learned. And so, to me, this was a beautiful experience working with techs, and not as a director or his supervisor, but as a friend. And so I thought that was neat. But with the people, we had cases where women were promoted and salaried same or higher level as men based on their performance. And to me, that was something that's just not being done enough today.
Yeah.
But in my environment, it was a case of everybody was performing and being awarded based on their performance. And what we did, we had a process where we had to go through a review.
Yeah.
We get reviewed by our immediate boss, and then that write-up goes to the next level, and that's reviewed, and then the next level up.
Right.
So we got reviewed up the ladder and make sure that everything was progressing well. And to me, I felt that being part of RAN SDC was a very, very positive experience.
Do you think there was something about the nature of that programming work where it made it where it was somehow clearer to see, who was performing well, that their programs worked or something like that. Was it I'm just wondering if what were the factors involved where it could be an environment where people's, performance would be clear, and it could be kind of, gender blind or color blind, and people's just performance could be more visible. I don't know. Do you know
Well,
why
I,
it was?
I
Why
think
was it
because
like that?
we just had a lot of people who were doing work and doing it well and enjoyed working together. There weren't that many negative interactions. We had problems, of course. Nothing, no one can go without having some problems. But in our early days, we were all like one big happy family. And I think as time progressed, you kind of spread out and had other problems. But we did so well, I think, as a company.
Were you all together? Were all the programmers together or was the whole software effort together in a single building, or were you spread out?
We were in different buildings. We had, was it Camarillo and Santa Monica and other places we programmed, and we got together and made sure everything worked together fine. Mm-hmm. I don't trying to remember now. I don't remember any major problems of trying to integrate everything together, making sure it worked.
Right.
Obviously, we had problems, of course, but we seemed to be working pretty well together.
Did you need to get a security clearance right at the start of when you joined RAND, or was that later, or when did that come into the picture?
I don't remember when I had to get it. I just know that as I progressed, I had to get it because of the work we were doing was a secure nature, and you had to have proper performance, proper credentials in order to continue working on. Because it wasn't just the programming, it was discussion of what you're doing and why you're doing it, why this worked, why this didn't work, what you have to do to change it. And so you're really deep into what you're doing to make sure that everything's going okay. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And let's see. Did you feel any pressure on this project because of the place of SAGE in the national defense and what was going on with the Cold War? Was there a feeling of pressure or urgency within the group?
I didn't feel that. I think we had a schedule that we tried to meet, and we had to. I think one of the things that we did as we progressed up the line, well, I know I did, I had a lot of discussion with the military, where you had to go in and discuss what you're trying to do, what they're trying to do, and the part that you're doing, does it fit in properly and make your job easier, or is it something we're not doing that we need to fix? And what was great about that is that, well, I'm not sure great, but because of having a higher level of security, which I had to have, you could freely open and discuss things. And in fact, we would often be invited to a special presentation and a special tape to see what's going on, and we could appreciate the activity that if you got all this to do, and we're doing a part of it, but that part is very critical to the whole process. And to see how what you're doing, how it's helping others, and while it's progressing, and while you have to change maybe this or that to be more involved in other activities. I just enjoyed being able to sit and talk and be open.
Right.
With the military. We weren't playing yes sir, no sir, type thing. It's a case of we could just talk using first names if we wanted to, and not necessarily captain or major, but using first names and able to discuss things and see what's the best approach to get something done. I guess I just enjoyed it.
And were most of those interactions with the military happening with organizations that were here in the Los Angeles area? Because, I imagine that from the experience with SAGE and all the activity going on, that a lot of the work was related to aerospace, so a lot of the organizations would have been out here, or?
Yeah. No, we worked aerospace, and we worked with was it Sunnyvale? Mm-hmm. Air Force.
The satellite command up there.
Yeah, and then we worked with the group here. I remember all the names, but we worked together, I think, very well. And because I had a very high level, I had a level above top secret. That was important. And I could discuss openly with the people all the aspects of what was going on, and we would share things, and it made life so much easier to do this. And when we met met in a separate facility. We did not meet with the regular set of people. We had to be off in a secure environment to talk about what we were doing and how things were going. But I just enjoyed it. In fact, it's kind of a funny thing. When we had to go occasionally and discuss things, and I was told, I said I have to go in for an operation, whatever it was, and they said, well, you can't go and have an operation unless one of my people are there watching, and make sure you don't say something you're not supposed to say. I mean, not that they would do that, but that's what they would say. That was interesting.
From the anesthesia or something.
Right. Yeah, you can't talk about what you're doing, and so you got to make sure that someone's there, making sure if you do that they can take care of it. Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, that's another story. But it was good.
It's fascinating. Now, at some point in time, I guess it was during the SAGE programming effort, the programming group within RAND became the System Development Corporation.
Right.
Was that in the early 1960s? I don't know when that occurred.
It had to be pretty early, because once we went to RAND and found that we were just growing too big and had to separate, it had to be in the in the late 50s, I would think.
Yeah.
To do that.
And did that involve? Did you need to move the operation to new buildings, or?
Yeah, we had to go up to another building. Try to remember where do we go? I don't know. It's just so much going on. I don't remember. Yeah.
Was your impression that it was a big change going from RAND to system development?
Not at first. I just something in learning. It's just a learning process.
Right.
No. And because it was the same, it was called people. RAND, then it's called SDC, but it's the same people, the same organization. There's really no change except maybe a location.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I was interested to ask about, in the 50s, What was the general or broader computing scene like while you were, you get out here, 1957 at Rand. What other organizations in the Los Angeles region were um, into digital computing at this time? UCLA, the aerospace companies. Did you have any interaction with other?
I think I got more involved with aerospace and TRW and I don't remember all the goes ran, but I'm trying to remember. Just can't remember all the different.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, shifting gears, I wondered if in this time of in the 50s into the 60s, what did you think made for a good programmer? Was there a particular personality type or a background, or was there any commonality to what made a good programmer?
I would say one that had patience and he was smart. Because one, if you didn't have patience, you couldn't get the job done. Because there are times when we got so frustrated by something not working, and if you got to the point where you just couldn't handle it, you don't need to be there. And so you had to learn to accept failure, to accept the fact that you will get the problem solved and get it working. And don't be discouraged by the fact that what you thought was okay is not okay. And to accept what people are saying and evaluate it on the point of, does it help my job, or does it make it worse? And don't be afraid to speak up and tell somebody no. I mean, it just to me, I just enjoyed the fact that you could openly talk about things and forget all the secret stuff, but just normal stuff, and get response and be able to talk to people and just get things done. What's sad, though, in a way, is that sometimes because you are in charge of an area and there are problems, you got to look at the problems and try to resolve it instead of worrying about getting the job done for work. And I, sometimes I'm home and I'll call someone from home and find out how they're doing and what's going on and what can I do to help. And then the other thing is, when we lose, and this is difficult to talk about, but when we lose a person that we've been working with for so long, and then that's really tough. And then what we found is that their family will come back to us with cards of thank you for what we did. Sorry.
Oh, no,
and
please.
It's just beautiful to have people appreciate what you do and who you are, and the fact that they were part of that, and you get the work done. And anyway, that's good. The worst part of that is that sometimes I'm told by my boss, you got to call person X and tell them they are no longer hired.
Yeah.
They're going to be fired.
Right.
And I had to do that at least 2 or 3 times. And that is very, very difficult, because I feel that's not right, in the sense that they should be facing you and you should be able to tell them face to face. But that's not always how it can happen.
Right.
And that's tough. And then I remember, get off the subject here, but
please,
I remember one time it was, I'm coming into work, and this fella's coming in, and he's saying, I need to talk to so-and-so. And I wonder, why is he asking me that? He said, because I'm FBI or whatever he was, who knows, some agent, that I need them to come out because I may have to take them into jail or
Oh my
wanted.
gosh.
And I'm saying, I'm not going to have my person come out, and not that they had to be working for me, but
Yeah.
and then come out, and then they take the person off to jail. So, but that happened once, and I got back and I told the person what was going on, and I said, it's up to you. I cannot do this. And the person went out and talked to the person, and I guess they went off and did what they had to do.
Wow.
But that to me is one of my worst experiences, is that kind of thing. And
It sounds like you put a lot of attention and care into the group so you could, have that cohesion so you could get the job done. Do you think were there other people who were in the organization who were as involved with their people as you were, or were you different?
Yeah, I think we were a person group, and we all got together very well and worked okay. And I remember, I still have it. My group, I think at that time I was probably group head. I'm not sure, maybe branch head, but I guess Christmas time I got this little lifelike little doll, and it had in one hand a whip, and another hand a book or something, and it had a note in it, and it was a Christmas present from one of the kids, and it said, you're tough, but I like you, something like that. And I still have it hanging up in my den. This little character, But you had to let your personal problems not get in the way of you responding and helping people that are working for you or that you're working for. It's important. You can't let that mess up getting the job done.
Right.
And so I just enjoyed working for RAND and SDC, and it was tough to see the changes coming along as the years went over. It was not, you didn't have that the personality sitting, friend sitting to talk, and it just seemed like it was do this, do that, do this, do that. Don't bother me, I'm too busy, do this, do that kind of world, and that to me was bad.
Do you think that was just because of the changes in the organization, or was it in changes in the sort of work that the organization was
doing? It's
doing?
probably both. I don't know. It could have been me too, being so used to the other way, and then seeing it's different, and it's tough.
Well, at some point, this was a question I had. At some point, the Sage installations get built and the software is running. But I wondered how much for System Development Corporation and perhaps for you personally, was there a lot of like continuing development of the Sage system or software maintenance sorts of works? I mean, were you on Sage for a long time while it was deployed? And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was involved, and then we would actually do the work, and then we would actually go to the Air Force base and visit, and then you can sort of watch and see how things are going, and it's and to experience a launch or something, and that's going, and because we had to program software that we utilize in some of the satellites, and just to be able to see that, and then course, you have to have access to get in. You just can't walk in.
Right, sure.
But it was good. You know, I just enjoyed the fact that SDC was so person-oriented, and then when Unisys took over, I just felt a lot of the togetherness sort of disappeared somewhat. You know, it was like too much of a business and less of a person kind of thing.
Right.
But not that I can't complain about having a job, but it's just a different kind of environment to work in. You know, and I guess you have to do that because you can't afford to be you know, you got to get things done, and you got schedules, and you got to just do it.
Right.
And so I know it's tough, you know. Yeah.
I was curious about, you know, you were in so you're at SDC and you're working on different kinds of software efforts and programming efforts, you know, across the 60s and then across the 70s. And there's a lot going on in computing in those years. And if you just could comment about, you know, in this time as higher level programming languages are coming in, and things like time sharing and computer networking are coming in. You know, how did that just change the world of making software?
Well, I'm sure it changed a lot, and the problem is I never got involved in it enough. You know, what's interesting, when I was at SDC and ran, and training operation, what have you, I had my son come in, and I got him involved to get training and stuff, you know, and see how he would do. And he eventually left and went to TRW and in some other places. He now works for Oracle, and he is engrossed in all the top level. Oh God, I couldn't understand the things he's talking about. But I'm not. I'm like way down here, you know. And I don't know if I could have adapted or not. But I guess fortunately, I had to be terminated because of my illness. I think that was a big plus, because I don't know that I could have actually adapted properly and to be effective as a programmer or as a person with the change in the technology.
So did you, as you took on these larger responsibilities for groups, you were getting farther from doing any programming yourself?
Yes, right.
I see.
Right.
So it's more talking about, you know, the requirements and
it must be
schedules.
Done. Schedules on time. You can't do this. You got to do that. You know, I mean, it's you know, you have to change your way of thinking in a way, and how you go about and conduct business, and you know, and in working. Now, when I was going to work, I always go and I always work more than the normal so-called 8 hours. I just spent a lot of time at work. But when you are married and having kids, you just can't keep doing that. You have to take care of your family at the same time. And you know, it's not like when I was just starting out, where I could just spend hours and hours and hours, and then go to school and come back and spend more hours and enjoy what I was doing, and then getting things done. It's not the same world anymore, you know. Plus, the world is advanced. That, you know, it's like a funny thing. When we're growing up with the kids, we had a lot of word games. We would get together, we would play the word games. Well, now they don't play word games. They're on the computer. They're looking, you know, they're playing on the computer. It's a rarity that they would actually play a word game. Yeah. Even the word games have now been modified to work where you have to work as a computer. I mean, it's totally changed. And so I'm like too old-fashioned. I could never survive, I suspect, in the day's environment. Well, because I got vision and hearing problems, but that's not an excuse.
Right.
It's just that the world has changed, and you've got to be able to adapt as the world is changing. And I just did not do that. So in a way, it was a blessing that I stopped working when I did.
And that was, what year was that you had that medical retirement from Unisys?
It was probably I was 59 when so it was probably 61 or something.
In 1991 or something like that, right? Would that be right?
That's
33 plus 50 is...
Well, I started working, I started working when I was 18 and 59, so that would have been 41 years. I worked for 41 and a half years. So if I started working...
In 51, so
it was
92 or something like that?
Early 1990s.
Right. Well, do you think that even though you weren't, even though you weren't programming anymore, you were still working with programmers, do you think that these same characteristics that you thought were important for being a programmer, of being smart and being patient, was that consistent across that whole time, or?
Well, I think you got to be smart and patient, but then you have to be able to operate different equipment, and you have to be able to be smart enough to know how to key in stuff, how to use a computer in a different manner, how to use this, how to use that, and it's just a whole new world of a learning process, I guess. I don't know if I could do it or not. I'm sure I could not do it.
Well, I was also curious about, that time of your working life, from, the 50s to the early 1990s. There are big changes happening, culturally in that time. We have the civil rights movement. We have, that's a huge change in society and culture. And I just wondered how your reflections on that. How did those changes in our broader society, manifest in your professional life or, in your personal life? I'd just be interested in your thoughts.
From a personal point of view, it didn't change. It just made me frustrated because I couldn't do certain things because I had not learned how to use it. It's like my kids could, they could sit at the computer or have their hand calculator. They can do all that stuff, and I wouldn't know what they're doing. So it's not like I could interface today as I would have done 20 years ago or whatever. It's just not the same environment to work in, and you're not worrying about paper tapes or cards or magnetic tapes and stuff like that.
Right.
You could just get in and get results and look at it, and it just works fine for you. It's like if my son takes me to a doctor, he has his knapsack, and in that knapsack is his keyboard, and so he can sit there and do all his work while I'm being processed by the doctor, so to speak, and get things done. So even though he's not at work, he's at work. In fact, his office is just in his house. Mm-hmm. It's not going to an office downtown somewhere. He actually can operate mostly from his home. And it's not, you just can't do that in my day.
Right. I guess, yeah. In addition to those technological changes, I was just wondering about, like the social changes too, about that were happening in the country, like in the 1960s, and how that, did you see that reflected in your workplace, like around women's rights or around civil rights? It already sounds like you were in a pretty open organization. I'm just wondering how those big social movements were reflected in what you saw in your part of the computer world.
Well, in my world, interesting enough, I did not see the presidential aspect of women not being treated fairly, or some particular race is not being treated fairly. I didn't see that happening, maybe because there weren't that many involved in it, but I didn't see that happening that much in my time environment when I was working. Now I'm sure it is, just from what I'm seeing, even though I have a problem with all this recently with the ladies attacking these men for doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. And I kind of wonder, well, why now? Why so many? And it's not like it's not bad. It's bad. It really is. My question, I always keep wondering, are they all real? I keep thinking back to my church, and this was many years ago, and they were being accused by some kids of doing stuff on the altar, with people.
Yeah.
And that they were doing other things that they shouldn't be doing. And then when it got all checked out, these kids were just lying. They even had people come in from the city to check out all to make sure it wasn't covered with blood. It just is ridiculous. And to have all this done because the kids just want to have fun. And then every time I see someone being blasted in the TV, I say to myself, is this real or is it not real? Now, as far as women are concerned, it's got to be real. There's too many of them that says it's not real. There may be some there who might be just faking to get money, but I think these are major problems.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad to see this, because why can't you be, when we worked, and we had a lot of women who were working or in charge, and they never had this problem of inadvertent, aspects of the work. They were treated as a worker, and to see that change in this environment, it's awful. But I also wonder, are they all real? And that's just me. And yet it's real enough that it needs to be changed. There's no question about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, could you characterize, you mentioned, what were the sorts of projects that you were involved with, like big software projects after Sage, where, just in a general, if you could generally describe them, were there, military projects mostly through your career at SDC and then into boroughs and Unisys? Was it mostly government work?
It was mostly government work, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we interfaced it with aerospace, with the military, like from day one till I left, because we had to make sure that things were working right. I spent a lot of time on the phone with the military. I spent a lot of time going down face to face with the military. That was not my enjoyable times. I'm not a telephone person. And to have to go and talk to the military, and yet we had a very good relationship. It was not a problem of being able to get on the phone and talk to a person on the telephone, and it's not a problem. In fact, when some of them retired, I would go to their retirement party, which is in a park somewhere, and then they're just all friendly. It's just great. And so it wasn't so much that we were enemies, it's just that it was adjustment to change. So, but it worked out in most cases pretty well. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Let's see. And as you look back on your career in software and with computers, what do you think were your greatest successes and your greatest failures professionally?
I think my greatest successes was that I would tackle a problem. I would get the problem done on time, and I would get the problem done that it worked. And that was a plus. I think that's why I got promoted the way I did, because I was able to handle and work with people well and adjust well, interface with no major problems, and get the job done. The problem I had was sometimes I felt as went up the ladder of supervision, that those at the upper level were not aware of all the things we had to go through, and it often was important to sit and talk with a above supervisor and explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we see as problems. And when I was in the SAGE SDC RAN environment, it wasn't that large that we couldn't just go and talk. But as we got out and started growing and growing and growing, it was difficult to always go to the right person at the right time to talk. And then the thing is, when they go in different areas, like I had to spend a lot of time going to Camarillo, where we had office and things, in order to go to meetings and discuss things. And I couldn't discuss it where it was in Santa Monica. They kept moving the facility personnel away up in the valley, and so that made it difficult. The driving, I really hated the driving. They keep driving and right. Lord, So that was something I had to adjust to. And when we go to like the yearly parties or the anniversary parties, and then I see people I've worked with in the past, it's all very, very friendly. There's no animosity floating around, even to those you may have fired or had to let go for whatever reason. There's still a good family in a sense. It's just neat, And I wish I could remember the names of people, but I don't. I even get stuff from people. I said, "Now, who is that person?" I'll get birthday cards, or I get a Christmas card, and I don't do that anymore because I just can't, because my vision and other things, I just can't. And I say, my goodness, wow. So you leave a good impression. I think that's important. That you whatever you do something fairly. You do it with proper vigor and with proper set of words that explain why this is not what it should be. Oh, that is good.
I wanted to ask you about the kind of makeup, the makeup of the computing community over time. It seems like there was an era where the participation by women in computing was better than it has become more recently. Which is a discouraging trend. It also, and it also seems that there has been an ongoing challenge about African Americans participating in computing across this whole period of time. And I was just interested in your thoughts about that. Why that is, why that has been, why does that continue?
I don't know.
What you think about it?
I don't really know, because a lot of the work is done at home, and you don't necessarily see the personnel. I mean, I don't know, because I'm not involved anymore, and it's hard to say. It's just that when I talk to my kids, and at least the ones that involve, like my son and my daughter, they're involved with all kinds of people in their work environment, and I don't get a sense of discrimination. It may well be. I just don't see it, because I'm not involved in that anymore, and I don't see that happening. It's hard to say, because I just don't know. I don't interface with anyone, speak of. Like when I would go to meetings and things away from work, so to speak, the makeup is a reasonable makeup of personnel, of backgrounds, gender, beliefs and things. It seems pretty much shared, and so I can't say how that would be in a work environment. I just don't know. When I see what's on TV, it appears that the women are getting shortchanged, as well as some of the minorities. But I don't know how it's really working in a day-to-day thing. I just don't, because I'm not involved in that.
And you, it seems like you are working in an environment for your career that was maybe especially good on some of these issues.
Well, it was my experience in my gender was based on performance and not based on how you looked.
Right.
And so I don't know how to answer that, except I just wish that we had more of that, where you work because you're good, but you also are a different gender and you're a different racial composition. And I don't know. And maybe it is happening somewhere, but I don't know that that's the case.
Well, thank you. I also wanted to ask you to reflect on Southern California as a place for computing over time, because it's my impression that in the 1950s and the 1960s especially, the greater Los Angeles sort of region was, a leading center for computer work. and certainly it continues. Computer efforts continue very strongly in the Los Angeles region, but maybe not at the kind of prominence that it had in the 50s and 60s. Any thoughts about that? The story of the region in
No,
computing?
I can't. I mean, what I see, there's so much of the individual stuff that people just have their computers with them, and they do their thing with the computers, at home, on the road, travel. I just don't know how their environment is as far as the company itself.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Okay.
It's like I said, my son, he does his work in his home. He has his office up in his den.
Right.
Pretty much. And when he has to go to work, which he does occasionally, but that's not the norm. So I don't know how it is for all the others. I'm sure there has to be a collection of people at offices somewhere getting jobs done, but I don't know how it works. I wish I could. I'm just sort of blind to all that stuff.
Well, then the last questions that I had that I wanted to talk with you about have been your interests and activities outside of work. What have been your major? Obviously, you spent a lot of time working very hard at work, but in your retirement and before that, what were the other parts of your life like?
Okay, I mentioned earlier that marriage encounter, which Cynthia and I have been in, good Lord, since the early 80s, and so forever. And it's a group of people, different denominations, but who make good marriages better. So we're not as active as we were like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's a very important part of our life. Also, we've been in this house 52 years. We had a neighborhood watch for like 30 years. Very, very active and beneficial. And in fact, the way it's supposed to work, we're supposed to have worked out where the president and vice president and secretary would maybe have a 3-4 year thing, and then we vote for, okay. Well, it hasn't happened. I am the president of our neighborhood watch. My friend down the street, he's the vice president. A neighbor across the street, she's still the secretary. Nothing's changed. But we had a wonderful, we haven't done much in the last 4 years for many reasons. One, getting enough young kids, and the ones who are doing it are aging like us. Yeah. But in the old days, we would have monthly meetings. I would collect a $1 per month from each household, and I set up a bank account, and that goes in the bank account, and that money was used if a particular neighborhood, a member died. We would take some money and use that to have a card that all the neighbors signed, and maybe other things we can give to the family. Or it would use to support, like we had a special Halloween party, we would decorate the garages, we would have special things for the kids, and we would give out prizes, whoever had the most scary garage that you go through. And these things like this we did, and it was a very, very beautiful experience. And then late, not only getting kids to take over, but we had families moving out, and then the kids growing up, moving out. So we have not been active, but that was a very, very active environment. The other things, like when I was working for SDC, after we left the SDC RAN aspect, they were very beneficial and let me do things. For example, the company had a group of people who did what was called a youth motivation task force. We would go to the various schools that had some problems, and we would go on to the 8th grade, and we would talk to the kids and try to convince them of staying in school, at least get a high school education, hopefully go to college. And it's very interesting. Once I went and the instructor was trying to get the kids to quiet down, and I went over, I said, please leave. And I took over the class, and that was wonderful. We got a lot of things done. Another time I was going through, and just me, no instructor there, and this one kid, he came to me, he didn't come, I was walking through the room, he said, you know, I make more money doing what I do than you make at work. What? I sell drugs. God, can you believe that? He couldn't be more than 15 years old, 16. And then another kid in another room, while I was talking, he drew a sketch of me, and he gave me a picture. It was a beautiful picture, and I don't know where I put it. And this is the experience at Youth Motivation Task Force. And then another time I went, and the kids were disruptive, and I tried to get them to quiet down. And this young lady stood up and said, that's it, quiet. She sat down, and everybody was quiet. So that's an experience you get outside of work. Yeah. But the problem wasn't a problem. The beauty of it was that work allowed me to do it. It allowed me to take off hours of my time, their time, to go talk to young kids. Now, that's a beautiful experience. Yeah. So I can't knock that. That was just wonderful. So I did a lot of these things outside of work, and it just kept me busy. Well, not just me, but Cynthia too. Right. Because the neighborhood watch, it was not just me, it was her as well. She was very beneficial. And then we had the younger kids go to softball, and we would go, Cynthia and I, and play a lot of tennis with friends. And then we would go bowling, and we would bowl ourselves, and then we would go bowl with friends. Then we were part of a group of adults where we would go. And Cynthia has a whole bunch of bowling trophies in the room there that she earned through her bowling experience. And then it's just one of those things. So it wasn't like, we did a lot of things outside of work. Right. That was very important as a family. And then with kids, they were doing their thing. But Cynthia also went on a lot of trips together. One of the, I'm getting off the subject, I know. One of the pluses of my job, I did a lot of traveling to different states for activities, and I used American Express. I got American Express points for traveling, and when one of my daughters had to go, she was her group to go back east. I was able to give her use my American Express cards for her to go back east. In fact, when a year ago, she had to go on her family reunion. I had enough points that there's no. So there's things you get if you're doing a good job of working and you're being dedicated to work you're doing. There are aspects of work that are a plus, and I got a lot of those pluses. I cannot complain about my work environment at SDC. It was very, very good. Yeah, so.
Well, I think we have come to the end of the question list that I had. Is there what have I missed? Is there any big thing that I've missed, or
Well,
is there anything else that you'd like to share?
oh, well, my one thing, my wife, one of the things, again, my express points, she went to Harvard College, and she was on the choir, and the choir of that college and other colleges were selected to go sing in Carnegie Hall, and she did that. And then some of her aunts came out to New York, and so to see that was sort of neat, yeah. And it's just, things we're involved with, Neighborhood Watch, Marriage Encounter. We're very busy doing things together. And of course, as she gets more and more, because she got Alzheimer's disease, and that's so so it's a problem there. But before that, we did a lot of traveling. In fact, I had a whole thing of spoons we get from all the places we've gone to. I got 3 little cabinets full of spoons.
Yeah.
And so it's just right now it's a sad time because Cynthia's she's gone, and I'm here by myself. I have to I gotta get to a smaller place, and it's difficult getting rid of stuff. I go through papers and things and books, and I said I can't get rid of that because I'm too close to it, and it's a problem, and so I have to somehow adjust myself to get rid of paper.
Yeah.
And I haven't got there yet.
Well, I'm not the right person to talk to about that because I think I'm about the worst person possible for that. Well, I think thank you very much, Joe. That was just